The air over Upperville, Virginia, carries a kind of silence that almost feels alive. Nestled against the soft rise of the Blue Ridge foothills, it's a town that seems preserved in time. White fences tracing the edges of long horse pastures, oak trees bending over gravel roads, and homes that stand as quiet witnesses to generations gone by. On most days, the loudest sound is the wind through the grass or the slow creak of a screen door closing. But in August 2001, that peace fractured. Before diving in, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest cold case stories. When the first Loudoun County Sheriff's deputies arrived at a small farmhouse on Green Garden Road, just outside Upperville's historic village center, dawn light was still bleeding through the trees. The early fog was thick enough to blur the outlines of the property, the garden gate, the porch railing, the window where lace curtains barely moved. But inside, what they found silenced even the most seasoned among them. 81-year-old Ursula Haberland was dead, and not from natural causes. It was the kind of discovery that didn't belong to this place, not to a town where most residents still left keys in their ignitions, where neighbors exchanged vegetables from their gardens, and where people like Ursula were part of the landscape itself. To understand the shock that rippled through Loudoun County that day, you have to understand who Ursula Haberland was. Born in Germany, in the shadow of a war that reshaped continents, Ursula had known hardship before most people knew hope. Those who remembered her stories said she spoke often, not of tragedy, but of resilience. She had endured bombings, hunger, and displacement, yet found her way to the United States determined to rebuild from nothing. By the time she settled in Upperville, she had lived a full, hard-won life. Her modest, white-sided farmhouse sat tucked among wildflowers and tall grass, surrounded by quiet, rolling fields that caught the afternoon sun. To many in the community, she was the image of independence, a widow who preferred solitude but never isolation. Her neighbors described her as polite, proper, and strong-willed. She kept her yard tidy, maintained her small vegetable patch, and could often be seen walking to her mailbox wearing a straw hat and light jacket, even in the heat of summer. Ursula had no children nearby, but she wasn't forgotten. The people of Upperville looked out for her, dropping off baked goods, checking in after storms, or helping her with the occasional repair. It was the kind of small-town attentiveness that made her death all the more incomprehensible. In the days leading up to that August morning, nothing seemed unusual. Ursula had been seen tending her garden and speaking with a few locals in the small grocery store near town. There were no reported disputes, no financial troubles, no calls to law enforcement. To all appearances, she lived quietly, just as she had for years. That's why the scene discovered inside her home felt so deeply wrong. Investigators were tight-lipped, but word spread quickly through the grapevine that Ursula had been murdered inside her residence, and that the nature of the attack suggested a violent struggle. No valuables appeared missing. There were no signs of forced entry. Whoever had entered her home had likely been someone she knew or trusted. For locals, that realization was chilling, because in a community where everyone knows everyone, that could mean anyone. Neighbors recalled how deputies and forensic teams spent long hours inside the small farmhouse that week. Evidence bags moved quietly from the doorway to patrol cars. Crime scene tape fluttered in the breeze like a warning line between the known and the unthinkable. For many in Upperville, it was the first homicide in memory, and it changed the rhythm of the town overnight. Doors that had once been left open were locked, porch lights stayed on. Conversations at the post office and general store carried a new, uneasy tone. The question that hung over the valley was simple and terrifying. Who could have wanted to harm Ursula Haberland? She had no known enemies, no history of conflict, no reason anyone could see for violence to find her at all. As detectives began piecing together the timeline of her last days, they found themselves tracing a life defined by quiet strength, and searching for answers that seemed to vanish into that same stillness. In the years since, investigators have described the case as one of Loudoun County's most haunting unsolved homicides. The cold case unit continues to revisit evidence, re-examine forensic materials, and appeal to the public for information. But in 2001, as the investigation began, the task ahead felt almost impossible. What little evidence existed pointed nowhere clear. Leads would emerge, then dissolve. And behind every unanswered question was the same painful truth. A woman who had survived so much was gone, taken by someone still unaccounted for. The people of Upperville, who had once measured their days by the rhythm of horses and the passing of clouds, suddenly found themselves living in the shadow of suspicion and grief. And as the days turned to weeks, the quiet that once defined the town became heavy, the kind of silence that carried both loss and unanswered fear. How does evil find its way into a life so peaceful and leave behind not a single trace? That was the question investigators were about to face as they stepped into Ursula Haberland's world for the first time. The morning of August 23, 2001, began like any other in Upperville, Virginia, a town where life still moved at the rhythm of the countryside. Along Green Garden Road, sunlight broke gently through layers of fog, touching old farm fences and dew-drenched fields. Horses grazed in silence, and the first pickup trucks of the day rolled past the post office without hurry. But by late morning, that familiar calm began to fray. A neighbor noticed that Ursula Haberland's mail, usually collected promptly each day, had been piling up in her rural mailbox. The sight felt wrong. Ursula, 81 years old, was a creature of habit: morning mail, garden chores, afternoon tea. By the third day, the stack of envelopes still sat untouched. Concern turned to unease, and the neighbor decided to check on her. Knocks went unanswered. Curtains hung still. The house looked undisturbed, yet something about the silence felt heavy. The neighbor made the call no one in Upperville ever expected to make: a welfare check to the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. Deputies arrived a short time later and entered through a back door. Inside that modest white-sided farmhouse, they encountered a scene that shattered the town's innocence. Ursula Haberland was found dead inside her home. Authorities confirmed she had been murdered. There was no sign of forced entry, no ransacked drawers, no missing valuables. Her purse and jewelry remained where she'd left them. It appeared that someone had come quietly, committed an act of violence, and vanished just as quietly, leaving behind only shock and silence. Officials confirmed publicly that it was a homicide, but withheld key details about how she died, a decision that only deepened the mystery and fueled quiet speculation through the valley. Within hours, word spread across Upperville. Neighbors stood at the end of Green Garden Road as flashing lights reflected against the morning fog. A community that once measured danger by the speed of a passing car now faced something it could neither see nor explain. For the first time in living memory, fear lived here. Residents who'd always left doors open began locking them twice. Porch lights stayed on through the night. At the corner store, conversations dropped to whispers when Ursula's name was mentioned. She lived through the worst times in the world, one neighbor later told the Loudoun Times-Mirror. She came here for peace. She found it until someone took it away. Inside the farmhouse, detectives from the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office began a painstaking search. They collected fingerprints, fibers, and possible traces of DNA, anything that might hold the identity of a killer. But technology in 2001 was limited. The ability to analyze degraded or partial samples was far less advanced than it would be 2 decades later. Even so, investigators preserved every scrap of evidence, knowing that science would one day catch up. Almost immediately, the investigation hit obstacles. There were no witnesses, no suspicious vehicles. No one remembered a stranger in the area. Upperville's rural landscape, wide pastures and long stretches between homes, made canvassing difficult. Detectives visited farms and back roads, speaking with horse trainers, stable hands, and delivery drivers, searching for any hint of movement that didn't belong. Every conversation ended the same way, nothing unusual. To reconstruct Ursula's final days, investigators interviewed everyone who had seen her that week. She'd been in good spirits, tending her garden, chatting briefly with locals at a nearby grocery store. No disputes, no arguments, no distress. Her life appeared steady, ordinary, almost too still. That normalcy was what troubled detectives most. If this wasn't a robbery gone wrong, and if there was no clear enemy, then who, or what, had found its way to her doorstep? Some believed Ursula might have known her killer. The lack of forced entry hinted that she could have opened the door herself, trusting the person who entered. In a town built on familiarity, that was perhaps the most chilling theory of all. By late 2001, dozens of interviews had been completed, yet every promising lead dissolved into dead ends. Forensic results yielded no matches in national databases. There was no weapon recovered, no clear motive, and no suspect. The homicide of Ursula Haberland became one of Loudoun County's most haunting unsolved cases. Local papers ran quiet updates for months, but eventually the headlines faded, replaced by newer stories. Only the cold case unit, and a few neighbors who still left flowers by her old gate, kept her memory alive. The farmhouse on Green Garden Road stood empty for a long time, its porch light dark, its windows reflecting nothing but the surrounding hills. Yet, for those who passed by, the image of police tape fluttering in the wind never really disappeared. It was as if the valley itself had absorbed the weight of what happened, carrying it in silence. And still, one question lingered louder than the rest. If Ursula's killer wasn't a stranger, who had she trusted enough to let inside? Whoever it was managed to leave without a single trace. If you were an investigator, one detective later reflected, what detail would you have focused on first? Because sometimes the smallest detail, a footprint missed, a conversation forgotten, holds the truth. But in 2001, those truths were buried beneath time, fear, and fog. And what began as a desperate search for answers slowly hardened into one of Virginia's longest-running mysteries. When the headlines faded and the road along Green Garden Road grew quiet again, the case of Ursula Haberland slipped into a kind of uneasy dormancy. But for the detectives who had first stepped inside that farmhouse, the image of the scene never left them. For months that stretched into years, the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office continued to revisit the details, page by page, photo by photo, searching for what they might have missed. Every scrap of evidence had been cataloged, sealed, and stored under careful lock. Fingerprints, hair samples, trace fabrics, latent prints. The investigation was technically open, but leads had dried up. By 2002, Detective Sergeant Rick Simmons, one of the original investigators, summarized the challenge in a local interview. It's not that there's nothing to work with. It's that what we have doesn't talk back. Without witnesses, the case relied almost entirely on forensics, a field that, at the time, was still evolving. The DNA evidence collected in 2001 was partial and degraded, insufficient for a match in the CODIS national database. Still, Simmons and his team refused to close the file. They knew the technology would one day advance enough to re-examine the evidence. Even as years passed, Upperville never quite returned to its old rhythm. The site of Ursula's shuttered farmhouse served as a quiet reminder that the killer had never been found. At the annual church bake sale, someone would inevitably mention her name, often in hushed tones, as if saying it aloud might disturb something best left resting. "She was the heart of the road," said one neighbor. "You'd drive by, she'd wave. That's who she was. Whoever did this didn't just take a life, they took a part of our peace." In 2004, the Loudoun County Board of Supervisors approved the creation of a dedicated cold case unit, a small team meant to reevaluate unsolved homicides and missing person cases that had gone quiet. Ursula's case, stored among the first boxes, was one of their earliest assignments. Detective Sergeant Simmons, now nearing retirement, personally handed the thick binder to the new lead investigator, Detective John Groves. "Everything's in there," he said, "but don't expect it to speak unless you ask the right questions." The new cold case unit began a complete re-inventory of Ursula's case files. They revisited the photographs, Wide shots of the modest farmhouse kitchen, close-ups of doorknobs, light switches, entryways. They pored over autopsy results, noting each detail, looking for inconsistencies that might have been overlooked. And something did stand out. The absence of forced entry, which once suggested Ursula knew her killer, was now being reconsidered. Groves hypothesized that the perpetrator might have entered through an unlocked door, common in rural homes. This shifted the narrative. Perhaps the crime was opportunistic, not personal. That single reinterpretation opened a new path. Detectives pulled old burglary reports from the surrounding region between 1999 and 2001. They compared them for patterns, a similar entry point, a familiar window pried open, a stolen item discarded nearby. The hope was that one of those offenders might have escalated from property crimes to violence. By 2009, DNA technology had advanced dramatically. The cold case unit petitioned for the retesting of all biological evidence. Samples were sent to the Virginia Department of Forensic Science, where more sensitive testing methods could detect even trace DNA. Weeks turned into months. When the results arrived, they brought both relief and frustration. A partial DNA profile had indeed been recovered, a male donor. But it was still too incomplete to yield a definitive match. It was uploaded into the National CODIS database, generating no immediate hits. Still, that partial result meant one crucial thing. The killer had left something behind. For investigators who had spent years working in uncertainty, it was enough to reignite hope. The cold case unit also began re-interviewing individuals who had lived near Ursula in 2001. Many had moved away, others were elderly or had since passed. Those still in the area recalled small details, now seen through the lens of hindsight. One man mentioned a delivery van parked along Green Garden Road the week before the murder. Not unusual, he said, but it had caught his attention because the driver seemed lost. The report was too vague to act upon, yet detectives documented it carefully. Another neighbor recalled a stranger asking about a horse sale in the area around the same time, again circumstantial, but it expanded the timeline of who might have been nearby. None of these fragments led to an arrest, but each reinforced what investigators already believed, that someone unfamiliar had entered Ursula's quiet world and left destruction behind. Although Ursula had no surviving children, she was not without family. A niece living in Maryland became her closest advocate, periodically calling the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office to ask about progress. She was strong, the niece told reporters in a rare 2011 interview. She lived through war and rebuilding. I just can't understand how something like this could happen to her, here, of all places. That human voice, the quiet persistence of family, kept the case visible. The sheriff's office, in turn, publicly recommitted to seeking justice, adding Ursula Haberland's name to the county's cold case webpage, complete with tip line numbers and an open call for information. It was a small act of remembrance, but in cold case work, visibility is often the difference between silence and discovery. By 2018, nearly 2 decades had passed. A new generation of detectives inherited the file, now thick with addenda, test results, and handwritten notes. They began coordinating with the Virginia State Police Cold Case Unit to explore newer investigative tools: genetic genealogy, familial DNA searches, and digital cross-referencing. While the sample quality remained a limiting factor, experts believed that even a tiny improvement in testing sensitivity could finally identify the unknown male profile. And so the evidence was preserved again, carefully, almost reverently, for the day when technology could do what human memory no longer could. For Loudoun County detectives, cases like Ursula's become personal. Investigators retire, but files stay. The duty to solve them passes on, almost like inheritance. Detective Groves, now a senior officer, said in a 2020 public appeal, "This case is not forgotten. Someone out there knows what happened in that house. We only need one person to come forward." It was a reminder that justice, even delayed, is not denied. It just waits for the right moment, the the right piece of truth, the right voice to speak. As of today, the murder of Ursula Haberland remains unsolved, but it is not inactive. Her case is still featured among Loudoun County's open cold cases, a digital candle flickering on the sheriff's official website. Each year, on the anniversary of her death, investigators quietly revisit the file, hoping that time, which once obscured the answers, might eventually reveal them. Time has a way of reshaping stories. In the beginning, Ursula Haberland's murder was a shock that rippled through a quiet community, the kind of story neighbors whispered about in the aisles of the local grocery store. The kind that sat heavy on the front page for a few brief days before vanishing into the background noise of life. But the years didn't erase it. They simply folded it into the rhythm of the county, a reminder that even in a peaceful place, violence could visit unannounced and leave questions that never fade. As investigators aged and retired, her file was never buried under dust. Each new generation of detectives inherited the thick folder as if it were an heirloom, a symbol of a promise that the department made, not just to a victim, but to the very idea of justice. Some of the names on the report covers changed, but the photographs, the evidence tags, and the haunting absence of closure remained the same. In the evidence locker, the envelope containing the partial DNA profile sat sealed inside a temperature-controlled cabinet. To anyone else, it might have seemed like just a few sterile data points. But to those who knew the story, it was the closest thing to a voice from that farmhouse. A silent trace of the person who had taken everything from Ursula. By the late 2010s, Loudoun County had grown. The rural stretches of Green Garden Road saw more traffic, new fences, and larger homes replacing the old ones. Yet those who remembered her never forgot. The farmhouse where Ursula lived had long since been sold and remodeled, but locals said the place still carried an uneasy quiet after dark. Former deputies would occasionally drive past during night patrols, headlights glancing across the wooden gate, and feel that familiar ache of unfinished work. The cold case unit, now equipped with digital tools that investigators of 2001 could only dream of, began to integrate Ursula's file into a statewide cold case database that cross-referenced forensic evidence, known offenders, and unsolved homicides. The digital system created new opportunities for connection, tiny data threads that could link old evidence to modern profiles. In 2019, the unit submitted Ursula's partial DNA sample for evaluation under an expanded genetic genealogy program. The sample's condition remained a barrier, but experts noted that even a small breakthrough in sequencing could one day reveal familial connections strong enough to identify the unknown man's lineage. Still, progress came slowly. For detectives like John Groves, the man who had taken over the case years earlier, this wasn't failure. It was endurance. Some cases, he told a local paper in a brief interview, aren't meant to be solved quickly. They're meant to teach us how to keep looking. That perspective carried weight far beyond Ursula's case. Her murder, unsolved as it remains, became part of the foundation of Loudoun County's cold case philosophy, a constant reference point in training sessions for new detectives, a story told to remind them that persistence, empathy, and attention to the smallest detail often matter more than breakthroughs. Her case showed how fragile the line between ordinary life and tragedy could be, and how the duty to seek truth doesn't expire with time. In recent years, the Sheriff's Office renewed its public appeal for information, sharing Ursula's story on social media and state cold case registries. Posts included her name, her photograph, and a short reminder that her killer had never been found. Beneath each post, comments trickled in from residents old enough to remember, neighbors recalling her gentle accent, her garden full of tulips, her quiet resilience. Younger locals who had never heard her story before reacted with disbelief that such a crime could happen in their own county. It was a reminder that remembering itself is a kind of justice, that keeping her name alive is part of the work. The renewed attention also brought emotional echoes for her remaining family members. Her niece, now older herself, told a reporter that she still believes someone knows something. "You can't just erase a life like that," she said. Somebody saw something or heard something. Maybe they didn't realize what it was at the time. Her words became a quiet, rallying cry for the investigators who refused to close the case. Inside the cold case unit's small office, Ursula's file sits among dozens of others, different names, different towns, same unanswered questions. Yet her case stands out because it bridges the gap between eras, a murder investigated in the analog age, now sustained by digital hope. Advances in DNA profiling, probabilistic genotyping, and genealogy databases continue to expand the horizon. Detectives keep the physical evidence carefully preserved, knowing that science may one day do what human memory could not. What makes the story of Ursula Haberland resonate, even now, is not just the mystery of her death, but the tenderness of her life. She was someone who had endured war, who had built peace in a quiet Virginia town, who had grown old tending to her garden and caring for her home. And then, in one sudden act of violence, all that steadiness was shattered. But her story refuses to disappear because people, from the neighbors who still remember her smile to the detectives who still carry her file, won't allow it to. In the end, the legacy of the case is not about tragedy alone. It is about the way a community learns to carry loss while still believing in the possibility of justice. Each reopened test, each public appeal, each quiet drive past the old farmhouse represents another heartbeat of hope. The story of Ursula Haberland is not finished because unsolved cases never truly end. They linger in the files, in the minds of investigators, in the conversations of those who still remember. Even now, her name remains listed on the Loudoun County Sheriff's official cold case page, a short paragraph beneath a solemn header, a contact number for tips, and an unspoken invitation to anyone who might finally hold the missing piece. For the detectives who guard her memory, the promise is simple. They will not stop looking. And perhaps, somewhere out there, the person responsible still remembers too, the sound of gravel underfoot on that quiet March morning, the silence of the house they left behind, the small trace of themselves they didn't mean to leave. Time hides things, but it also reveals them. And sometimes, after enough years have passed, even silence starts to speak. Could the key to solving this case still be hidden in plain sight? 2 decades have passed since a quiet March morning on Green Garden Road turned into one of Loudoun County's most enduring mysteries. The world has changed 100 ways since then. Neighborhoods have grown. Fields once open have filled with fences and new homes, and the rhythm of the county has quickened. Yet the house where Ursula Haberland's life ended remains, in the collective memory of the community, suspended in time. For the detectives who first entered that farmhouse in 2001, the image has never truly left them. The silence of the rooms, the feeling that something gentle had been broken. They spoke of the way sunlight filtered through the lace curtains that morning, the ordinary beauty of it, and how that made the violence feel even colder. They remember the smell of the soil from her garden carried inside by the wind, the half-finished cup of tea left by the window, as if Ursula had only stepped away for a moment. Those memories linger in the corners of their minds like the faint trace of a dream that refuses to fade. To the community of Upperville, Ursula's murder was more than a headline. It was a loss of innocence. People who had once left their doors unlocked began turning the deadbolts each night. The easy trust between neighbors was replaced by glances over shoulders and cautious hellos. Parents who once let their children wander the fields near Green Garden Road began calling them in before dusk. The sense of safety that had defined life in that small pocket of Virginia was replaced by a lingering question. How could this happen here? Yet, even as fear settled in, so did determination. Local residents gathered for candlelight vigils in the months that followed, lighting small white candles on the steps of the county courthouse. They spoke softly about Ursula, about her kindness, her laughter, her accent that still carried traces of the life she had lived before coming to America. They shared stories of her generosity, her garden, her habit of leaving small baskets of vegetables at neighbors' doors each summer. The image of her life, not just her death, became the heart of those gatherings. In the years that followed, the case shifted from an active investigation to a standing mystery, one that refused to rest. Detectives changed, evidence passed hands, but the file never went cold inside the hearts of those who carried it. It became something personal. Officers who hadn't even been in law enforcement when Ursula died would later say that her case was one of the first names they learned when joining the department. It was spoken like a vow. We will not forget her. The technology that investigators once dreamed of eventually became real. DNA analysis that once required full profiles could now work from fragments, and computers could compare patterns across millions of records in seconds. The Loudoun County Cold Case Unit re-examined the evidence repeatedly, and every few years new testing was ordered. Each time, they hoped for a match, a single name that could end the long uncertainty. None came. But in the process, the investigation became something larger than the search for one person. It became a symbol of persistence itself. Detective John Groves, who inherited the case in 2004 and carried it through much of the next decade, once described the file as a mirror of time. "When you open it," he said, "you see the faces of everyone who tried. You see the handwriting of people who've retired, the notes of people who've passed. You realize you're part of a chain, and your job is to keep the light from going out." His words capture the essence of cold case work. Not only the science of it, but the humanity. By 2020, the sheriff's office had fully digitized Ursula's case, scanning each photograph, fingerprint card, and evidence log. On a computer screen, the once yellowing papers appeared renewed, preserved against decay. Technology had given the investigation a kind of immortality. Even if the killer's identity remained hidden, the record of the search would not vanish. To the detectives, that mattered. Every byte of data was an act of remembrance. Meanwhile, the landscape of Loudoun County continued to change. The fields near Upperville grew busier with traffic. The dirt roads were paved, the stores brighter. The air a little less still. Yet, even with all that change, older residents still marked the passage of time by the memory of that day. They could tell you where they were when they heard the news, or how the church bell sounded that evening when the sheriff confirmed the discovery. Some said the sound carried farther than usual, an echo through the valley that felt like mourning. For Ursula's family, life went on, but never quite the same. Her niece, now one of the last voices speaking publicly for her, continued to call detectives every few years, not out of impatience, but faith. She believed that justice was possible, even if delayed. "She was such a gentle soul," she once said in an interview. "If it takes another 20 years, I'll still be waiting for that call." Her hope reflects the quiet courage of families who live in the shadow of unsolved loss. They learn to exist in a space between grief and faith, mourning someone they love while believing that the story isn't over. In the cold case unit's offices, Ursula's file rests alongside dozens of others, each representing a name, a family, a question. To a stranger, they might look like paperwork, but to the detectives, they are promises. When they pass those files from one generation to the next, they are passing something sacred, the belief that truth, no matter how deeply buried, deserves to be found. The county's new DNA initiatives, launched in cooperation with the Virginia State Police and National Genealogy Labs, have already brought resolution to cases long thought unsolvable. Detectives speak quietly but confidently about Ursula's evidence, saying it is only a matter of time before technology finally gives it a voice. The fragment of DNA collected from her home still waits, carefully preserved, its code unchanging. It sits in a climate-controlled vault, behind steel and lock, as if guarding a secret that the years themselves cannot erase. Every March, on the anniversary of her death, someone in the department stops by the file. Sometimes it's a senior detective, sometimes a new recruit. They look at her photograph, they read a few lines of the original report, and they remind themselves why they do this work. "Justice doesn't expire," one of them wrote in a margin note years ago. The ink has faded slightly, but the sentiment remains clear. That's the strange beauty of cases like Ursula Haberland's. They reveal the endurance of human compassion. Long after headlines fade, long after the public moves on, there are always a few who keep the flame alive. Sometimes justice is a single moment, a courtroom verdict, a confession, a name finally spoken aloud. But sometimes justice is slower, quieter. It's the years spent refusing to forget. For the people of Upperville, the story of Ursula Haberland is not just about violence, it's about memory. It's about a woman who loved her home, who worked her garden, who trusted her neighbors and believed in the peace of her surroundings. It's about how one tragedy can ripple through generations and still call for answers. And it's about the idea that no one, not even someone taken decades ago, should vanish from history without a trace. Perhaps somewhere out there, the person responsible still remembers that morning. Perhaps they remember the sound of gravel under their tires, or the wind moving through the fields, or the way the sky looked when they drove away. Time can bury evidence, but it cannot erase conscience. And as technology continues to advance, as cold case units across the country reopen files once thought impossible, the chances of anonymity grow smaller every year. Justice may move slowly, but it never truly stops. So tonight, as you listen to this story, remember Ursula Haberland not as a mystery, but as a life, a neighbor, a friend, a woman who deserved peace. Remember the detectives who still carry her case and the quiet persistence of those who refuse to give up. Somewhere in those pages, in those fibers of evidence, the truth still waits. Because even after all these years, someone out there knows what happened in that farmhouse on Green Garden Road. Someone remembers, and one day that memory might be the final key. Until then, her story remains open, a thread of hope stretching across time, reminding us that justice is not just about closure, but about the enduring promise to never stop asking. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the search for justice and the untold stories behind each case. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow more revealed crime stories, and we'll see you in the next one.